This is a special satsang to celebrate the great holy day of Maha Shiva Ratri. It's important to clarify that we are not celebrating a Hindu holiday. And the Shiva that we are connecting with is not the Hindu version of Shiva. And it's very important to understand the difference. But this is the high holy day among those worshippers of Shiva who treat it much the way that the Jews treat the Yom Kippur. They fast and they pray and they spend the entire day in the Shiva temple, and they are in a constant state of either meditation in silence or song, mostly the chanting of mantras to Shiva, and the repeating of certain texts that are traditionally understood as being the key to understand Shiva and how to have a direct relationship rather than simply a belief or a sense of faith in the Supreme Being. But today, in the postmodern world, it's very difficult to explain Shiva to people. And it's probably more easy if we try to understand Shiva as a manifestation of the Tao. Or perhaps manifestation is not the accurate word, but the cause of the Tao. But that just creates another complication because people don't really understand what the Tao is. And if you want to understand what the Tao is, the last people you'd want to ask are Taoists. In the same way that the Hindus are probably the ones who understand Shiva the least. And you would probably do better studying the Christian Trinity and certain passages of the Old Testament and the understanding of the three bodies in Buddhism, the Dharmakaya, Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya, and various other esoteric traditional understandings that give different aspects of the understanding of Shiva that are more clear to the rational mind than the belief in a personal deity, as with all of the various kinds of stories that are told about Shiva in the Shiva Puranas and various other epics and mythological scriptures of the various religions that make up Hinduism. Because Hinduism isn't a religion in the same way that Judaism or Christianity is. It was simply a large number of religions that happen to all exist in the same space of the subcontinent known as India. And when it was conquered by Great Britain, they just called it all Hinduism because they were near the Indus River and therefore they were Hindus and whatever they were doing was Hinduism. But there were many different religions that were all kind of forcibly congealed into each other by the conquerors. And so if we really want to understand the nature of the various traditions that originally at least understood what is meant by Shiva, we would have to parse them out. We would have to go to the Kashmir Shaivites and read the Shiva Sutras. We would have to go to the Vira Shaiva tradition and understand the relationship of Shiva and Shunya, and we would have to go to various other traditions that have different aspects of the infinite nature of Shiva expressed and celebrated, but that leave out various others. So for tonight, perhaps we should take this Nataraj statue as our entry point. And because there's a tremendous amount to speak about in it, I would just relate the relationship between Shiva as the dancer of the cosmic Tandava and the dance floor that he's dancing on, which is the back of a dwarf. This dwarf is named Apasmara. And the story of the dwarf is interesting because I identify with him. And he represents that psychological position that you reach in life when you realize that God is dancing on your back. And he's heavy. And you've got to do something about it. And the only thing you can really do about it is try to ask him to go easy on you. And to do that, you've got to do some work for him. So you become Shiva's delivery boy, which is basically my position here. And by delivering messages from Shiva, who knows, I might get deliverance. So the place of the delivery boy is important only because Shiva is not understandable to most people, because he's not visible. And there's no description that one could give that would be accurate, although some people would be happy thinking of him as God the Father and others as an impersonal, unified field of information, and others as the creative power of nature, and others as the mother, the great mother, the womb of the cosmos, and various other epithets and mythological constructs that all have really nothing to do with Shiva, except in a metaphorical form that if you break the code, then you can understand what is really being gotten at. Because to understand Shiva requires a shift in one's psychological relationship to consciousness. The ego is a construct within consciousness. But the ego, because it is a kind of bubble that's turned in on itself, it generally doesn't recognize that it's one tiny bubble in an ocean of consciousness. And so Shiva, if he's going to get the attention of that consciousness that's trapped in an ego state, has to pop the bubble. In a way, the dancing on the dwarf is accomplishing that. But slowly, not immediately. The dwarf isn't being killed. He's being tortured. And Shiva, by drawing out the torture, also excretes a lot of information out of the dwarf. So it becomes a very interesting process in which jnana becomes revealed through a relationship that is forced to become ever more harmonious and unified, simply because any dissonance with Shiva creates pain, tremendous pain. And so you want to be in harmony with Shiva. So a certain point comes in life when you can't afford not to be in harmony with Shiva, and ultimately to melt into Shiva so that he's not dancing on you anymore, but you actually participate in the dance. And it's a very wonderful offering of grace. And so they say that there are 5 acts that Shiva performs. The 3 traditional ones are creation of the world as a dream, the sustenance of that dream, even though the dream tends to become ever more of a nightmare, but Shiva sends delivery boys and girls now and then to try to get people to remember Shiva and to bring about a return to a vibrational frequency that will sustain harmony in the planetary relationship of humanity to nature and humans with one another. But as the fall becomes more steep and the world turns into a materialist bastion of beings who prefer technology and what can be wrought from consciousness and weaponized and used for domination of nature, rather than to bring in the inspirations of a way to be in full harmony and magical relationship with nature. The magical relation is very different than the technological relation. It's one of a dance, it's not one of a conquest. So that model of reality that causes people to forget about the relationship of the creatures that we are to that force that created us, because we didn't create ourselves or this world. And despite what scientists might want you to believe, they don't know anything about the nature of the world. And I think that scientist, Michel Bitbol, who we've been listening to in a few videos, makes it very clear that the scientists only withdraw a tiny bit of information about the cosmic reality that has no self-sustaining understanding. It's simply guesses that are hubristically assumed to be laws of nature that gradually break down and that break the hubris of the ego as well. And so today we're seeing that general breakdown, not only in knowledge, because science has reached a limit that it cannot go beyond, and it's splintering into various religious sects, even within physics, but also the breakdown of everything that people have taken for granted because they have lost their remembrance of Shiva. That is the power that can bring harmony and intelligence back into the world, not to mention love, not to mention goodness, beauty, purity, etc. I should say more about Apasmara. Smara comes from the Sanskrit word smaranam. Smaranam can be identified or defined as either speech, language, or remembrance. It has both meanings. And apasmara is actually a diagnostic category of illness in the Ayurvedic medical system. So if smara means coherent speech, apasmara means nonsense, gibberish, or that which is not understandable, that which seems mad or crazy. But in the Ayurvedic tradition, apasmara also refers to a family of neurological disorders that happen to include epilepsy and catalepsy, and these are the diagnostic categories that such people as Sri Ramana fell into in their lives, and various other sages of many different traditions, and many great philosophers, literary artists, etc., like Dostoevsky is a famous example. So we have a category of a kind of sacred illness as well that tends to lead to paranormal and transcendent realizations. And also, we have the understanding that the one who speaks truths that come from a dimension beyond this flatland that we're in will seem mad to anyone in flatland. because the information does not follow the logic that we are taught to believe that the world works upon, even though we are beginning to see that it doesn't actually work upon that logic. So the level of intelligence required to understand Shiva means we have to grow beyond the ego, or we cannot do it. We won't make sense of it, even if we receive visions and inspirations and archetypal dreams or out-of-body experiences, or are taken to Shiva Loka or Paramdharma, and we have extraordinary experiences. We can come back from those and not actually understand anything we got out of it. And I have known beings who have been through such experiences. So I won't mention my own, but in any case, the issue of understanding Shiva may begin by understanding the metaphors, the mythological developments, because you wonder, why would a people continue to repeat and write down and worship and study stories that to the modern aesthetic appear rather ridiculous, and yet that obviously contain a tremendous amount of information, which is very parallel to our dreams at night. The mythological developments of Indian literature, sacred literature, are extraordinary for their depth of symbolic richness. But Hindus tend to take them literally, as if these are factual stories, you know, about things going on in different dimensions that are not intended to be news reports about other worlds, but are intended to teach you how to reach different levels of reality that are beyond what we think of as this world. And if we understand them, we can easily follow the instructions and get to meet Shiva. It's not hard, but it does require a sacrifice of the egoic frame of reference and many of the attachments to jouissance that come with it. And so that's why very few people have an interest in taking this understanding very far. It's so radical and so weird to the ear of someone who is not used to higher truth that you will never be able to explain it to your family or friends for the most part, or possibly not to anyone, if you get high enough. So it's lonely at the top, which is why they talk about non-duality, but it's also blissful. And so Maha Shiva Ratri is a holiday that, unlike any other holiday, because most other holidays in whatever religion are generally celebrating a past event, whether a mythological event or a historical event or a mythological event that poses as a historical event, but it's always something that in the past, and we are traditionally saying, wasn't that great, you know. But Maha Shiva Ratri is celebrating a future event that hasn't happened yet. But that Shiva promises will happen. So that makes this interesting in a certain way, if you're a betting person. And if you recognize that what the promise is of Shivratri is that the fifth act of God, I don't think I gave you all five. I talked about creation, sustenance, and destruction, right? But the other two are the key. One is Tirodhana, which means concealment, basically, Maya, that Shiva hides. He likes hide and seek. It's a very interesting game. And he hides so well that people start believing that God is dead. And they all become atheists. So he's very happy that he could fool everyone. But at the moment that people have stopped completely believing in the possibility that Shiva is real, that's when he performs his fifth act. And that is to reveal himself, herself, itself, the self, take your pick. But to reveal the self, not in the way that religions talk about, oh, Christ will come again, or Imam, this or that will come again, or Maitreya, the Buddha, or Kalki, or some other avatar of one or another god, or at least different name of God. No, Maha Shiva Ratri is the promise that Shiva and revelation, by the word, the word that is used is anugraha. It doesn't just mean the revelation of Shiva, it means grace. So it's the highest grace, which means also redemption and liberation. And what it means is that Shiva will manifest in such a way that the entire world will realize it is Shiva. Everyone. Every being, whether they're yogis or not, ultimately. Whether they're believers in anything or not, it's irrelevant. And Shiva doesn't care if anyone believes in Shiva. And so the understanding that this is, what we are dealing with is the return of the cause of the appearance of the world. But once the cause of the appearance of the world appears, what happens to the world? That is merely a reflection of that cause. You see, in a certain way, if we say that the world is the mirror image, and then we have Shiva manifest, the world dissolves into Shiva, is consumed, is subsumed, is the construct of world is deconstructed by force. It dissolves. And what we realize is that there was never a world. We have always been within the mind of Shiva as dream objects. And the awakening of the dream is the elimination of the dream and all the beings in the field of dreams, within dreams, who thought that they were somebodies. And so in this grace and liberation, there is also an extinction, an extinguishing of the illusion, and then a reappearance of a new illusion, but in a much more beautiful form, a form that truly reflects Shiva. And then Shiva disappears again, goes back and hides and lets the whole thing go on. But starting again from a place of perfection and infinite intelligence and understanding, and everyone is suddenly aligned with the truth. Your compass is suddenly in true north, and everything is clear and perfect, and you understand, why it all is and had to be what it was, and why it's going to be what it's going to be, and everything is perfect because one is able to perceive it from beyond the limitation of chronological time. One is out of flatland.